The story behind one of the greatest fist-pumping anthems of the entire 1980s from the co-writer, bassist, and lead singer of a band who lit up the mid-80s, next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. We interview the great artists of the rock and roll era, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And you know, it's a mystery every day of what we're going to bring to you. So make sure to subscribe right now. Click the bell so you never miss out. Also, don't forget to check out our exclusive content, behind the scenes and other videos on Patreon. Now, there's a small handful of songs that they can give you the courage that you never thought you had. They send like an energy through the body and the soul that can make a mere mortal feel like a superhero. Songs like Don't Stop Believin'. Eye of the Tiger. We Will Rock You. A few others. In late December of 1985, Mr. released one such song, after hitting #1 months before with their 80s classic, Broken Wings. Take these broken wings. Favorites ever. Lead singer and bassist Richard Page and company dropped the single Kyrie. And going into 1986, this powerful song took the charts and the nation by storm. And Mr. they started flying up the album charts as well with the multi-platinum LP, Welcome to the Real World. It started passing up, the likes of Whitney Houston, Bruce Springsteen, Dire Straits, Heart, ZZ Top, some of the biggest blockbuster albums ever. I mean, that's how big these guys were in the mid-80s. I mean, the double-fisted blockbuster hit singles, Broken Wings and Kyrie, were indestructible and just undeniable. I remember as a kid saving up weeks' worth of allowance to buy that record, and I listened to it obsessively for months. In fact, I moved, so I've got it in storage. I need to get that. And we've already covered the magical song Broken Wings a few months back, and you can see that by clicking on the link below. Like I said, Broken Wings is one of my favorite songs ever. So let's put that aside for a second, though, and focus on the other slammer, Kyrie. I mean, it's such an epic song. It's such a blast of energy that even when I was a kid, I remember listening, to music through my headphones to lull me to sleep. I remember I'd be lying in bed, sound asleep, with Mr. snugly lodged into my Walkman. And the second I would hear Richard Page sing, the words, Kyrie eleison, down the road that I must travel, my fist would just punch toward the sky and I would be up in a second. It just sent a message, a signal to my brain. My body couldn't control such a soulful reverberation of sonic power. Kyrie eleison means Lord have mercy. And in some ways it doesn't even matter what it means because I've heard people mess up the lyrics lots of times. What matters is the way it speaks to our soul and how the otherworldly vibrations give you the heart of a lion. So powerful is this song that even decades after listening to it every night, a few months ago, I remember I was dead asleep, dead of night, listening to my iPhone through wireless earphones, as I always do. I had a random 80s playlist on, and Kyrie came on. I about knocked my wife out of bed as I found myself sitting straight up, pounding my fists in the air, singing the chorus at the top of my lungs like I was sleepwalking. Needless to say, we now have a no Kyrie rule after midnight in our house. I mean, I woke up the whole house. It's just a perfect pop song. I mean, the law of averages really state that even the greatest artists count themselves blessed to write one perfect song in their lifetime. How rare is it to write two? Well, Richard Page, Steve George, and John Lang have done it. Like I said, with Broken Wings and Kyrie, both #1 singles during one of the most competitive times in all of popular music. In early 1986, it was enough momentum for the band to log time at the #1 spot on the Billboard Top 200 album chart, like I said, right before Whitney Houston and Van Halen dominated that spot for about 4.5 months. I got a chance to talk to Richard Page about my late night Kyrie exploits of waking up my wife and kids. I got to ask him about this song in an interview. I also had the chance to ask him about his time as a sought-after session player and songwriter for other people before he conquered the charts as part of Mr. Mister. Really interesting stuff here. We also cover that in this video. You're going to want to see. It's really cool. Richard Page may be the only man in the solar system to have written a song performed by Madonna, Michael Jackson, while also singing backup for Twisted Sister and on Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil, and jamming with one of the Beatles on a regular basis. That's why it's so interesting. Here's an interview with the supreme mister of Mr. Richard Page on Kyrie and his adventures as a session player. It also includes a special guest. As we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the frames of my choice. Go design your own pair right now. Do a virtual 3D try-on at zenni.com. And as we go into this interview, it just kind of hit me that, gosh, if I could have told my 10-year-old self that I would be the kid listening to Mr. Mister every single night, if I could have told him that I would be interviewing Richard Page, just crazy how things work out. Here he is.
This game of right or wrong.
Take me back to Who's Right, Who's Wrong. I was talking to Kenny Loggins earlier today. He was telling me about writing that with you and then having Michael Jackson come in and sing background vocals on. Tell me about that experience of recording that and writing that song.
Kenny is, I was a huge fan of Kenny's, and I can't remember whether I contacted him or it was vice versa, but we got together in a little apartment I had out in the valley, and I had a little Fender Rhodes set up in there and a cassette player. And we wrote the song together. I think it took a good part of the afternoon. And when it came time to record it, he had Michael Jackson come over, and Michael and I sang the backgrounds for Kenny. Kenny's one of those guys that sort of leaves no stone unturned, so to speak. And he likes to try all kinds of things, And he'll try this whole thing, and he'll just scrap that and let's start over and try this and that. So we were there quite a while. With Michael. That was an interesting experience.
Let's talk about Who's Right, Who's Wrong, because that's a song that you wrote with Richard Page, and we're going to be interviewing Richard today, actually later.
Oh, really? Tell him hi for me.
I will. And you guys wrote that, and of course you sang it with Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
He sang background vocals on it. I mean, how cool is that to say, yeah, Michael Jackson sang background vocals on it.
Yeah, had I had half a brain, I would have done a duet with him.
I know.
And not just stuck him in the background. I really loved a group that Richard had started called Pages. And I loved what they were doing, and I was moving in a jazzier direction, and Pages was very much a jazzy thing. And so we made a writing date, and we wrote Who's Right, Who's Wrong, and that was like one afternoon. In his band, Pages does a version of the song that's really interesting, and I think a little more soulful. Who's right, who's wrong? But I was leaning, I think I had Michael Brecker.
You did.
On that track. And the Brecker brothers are legendary in the jazz world. So I just pushed it in a jazzier direction. And then I ran into Michael Jackson. I met Michael Jackson at a party. And while we were talking, I said, would you be open to coming in and singing on something? But this was before
Thriller.
I think it was even before Off the Wall. I didn't really know what he was capable of yet. I knew he was great, but I didn't know he was that great. And, I think the biggest mistakes I've made in my career have been because I was self-producing. Had I had, I had Tommy Dowd, I guess he didn't know what Michael was capable of either, because we didn't catch the fact that was really not, in my opinion, the right song for that voice. I should have written something with Michael to have something funkier because I was capable of singing that, and I should have pushed myself to, up the ante for that. But, at least I can say he was on the record.
I'd written a song with James Ingram called Party Animal. And it was right around the time they were making Thriller, and Quincy was producing James Ingram and wanted an up-tempo song for him. So they'd sort of planned on this song being his lead single for the next album. Well, I guess Michael heard it and decided he wanted to do it. And, he really was crazy about the song. But Quincy talked him down off the ledge, and He said, no, I really want James to do this song. So we missed Thriller by about that much.
Oh, man.
I get up on the table, I get down on the floor, got the feet.
I loved Richard Page's work, especially in the old days with Pages and stuff. I just loved his voice. And he and Steve George, his keyboard player, co-wrote together and did a lot of studio singing. And then I would use Richard and Steve as background singers. I think, as a matter of fact, they sang backgrounds on.
They did. I think on Vox Humana, too. He actually sang backgrounds for like Twisted Sister and people like that, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the only guy that can say, I sang with Shout at the Devil with Motley Crue, and I sang with Kenny Loggins on this one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. But
No, they were doing a lot of work back then.
you sang backgrounds for Village People,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How did that come together?
You know, you just get a call sometimes. There'll be a contractor that you know, and they'll just call you, and they just basically say, show up at Village Studio at 11 a.m. You don't really even know what it is, you know?
Right.
And there's so many of them that you kind of, or maybe if they told you, you forgot or whatever. And I remember just showing up, and it was Bill Champlin, myself, John Joyce, Tom Kelly. I think Tom Kelly was in
Yeah.
it. And a bunch of other guys. And we're like, well, what is this? And they go, well, you guys are going to be the Village People today. Okay. And so we did, you know, I think it was the follow-up album to the one that had the big hits. So we just did gang vocals and had a good time.
You mentioned Tom Kelly, which writing partner Billy Steinberg, they had
Yeah.
5 #1 hits in the 80s. We just interviewed Billy about a month ago. And
Tom's a great old friend of mine and great
Yeah.
talent. He was the guy that could sing really high. We called him the dog whistle. Because he could just, you know, he like full voice C's and D's, you know. And he was always amazing like that.
And then, of course, Motley Crue, Barbra Streisand, REO, Sammy Hagar, Kenny Loggins, all these guys you sang background vocals. I mean, what was it like to sing background vocals on Shout at the Devil?
You know, it was cool. Those guys are great, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I dug their music. You know, it was a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but
Yeah.
but I did it. I sang Bastard, Bastard for about two hours. You know, that was fun.
And Twisted Sister, too.
Yeah.
So going into Mr. Mister, I read somewhere that you got the name from Weather Report album, right?
We were, Steve George and I were huge Weather Report fans. And we loved that song called Mr. Gone. And when it came time to put the band together, you know, we didn't have a name. So we just kept making this record. Pretty soon, it was getting almost finished, and the record company was saying, well, who are you? What are you going to call yourself? So I always thought, well, it's got to be Mr. something. We have to figure out. So we went through this list, Mr. this, Mr. that, Mr. that. And finally, Pat Mastellato, our drummer, just said, Mr. Mister. We all looked at each other and went, okay. And then that's kind of how it happened. I mean, there's no real significance to it.
Yeah.
There's no underlying thing about it.
I read somewhere that you were looking for a bassist.
Well, originally I was going to play some guitar and keyboards and sing. We were going to have a 5-piece, and there was a bass player that was coming with Pat to the audition. The story that I heard was that he had had dental work that morning, and his face was killing him, and he didn't come. So in order to get through the audition with Pat, and this is a true story, we were at a rehearsal studio, and they just happened to have a bass amp and a bass sitting there that somebody else had left behind. It hadn't taken out yet, whatever. So, okay, well, I'll just get us through this audition. Well, of course, we loved Pat. And at the end, we just looked at each other and went, wait a minute, let's just do it 4 guys. That's even better. So that's really how that happened.
During that time, as you were putting together the second album, my understanding is that you were offered a vacancy in 2 pretty big bands at that time that were looking for a bass player, lead singer, but also in Chicago's position.
Yeah.
Chicago and Toto. Tell me about that.
A lot's been made of that. And, you know, my name came up with a bunch of names. as far as, on a short list of people that would be good to replace Peter and Bobby Kimball. So that's really all it was. I was being considered for those gigs.
But you really wanted to focus in on...
I just felt like we had something really strong, and I just didn't feel like it was time to abandon that.
Kyrie, let's talk about that. The next #1 song, which #1 pop, #1 on the rock charts as well, Canada, top 10 worldwide, just a smash. Tell me about how that song came together. Again, one that you wrote with John Lang.
And Steve George,
Yeah.
I'd had sort of the little thing worked out. Kind of melody and stuff. And John called me up and he said, I got this idea. And I said, what? He goes, you remember Kyrie eleison, from the Mass, it's Greek. And it was, if you've ever sung in a church choir, there's some version of Kyrie that,
oh yeah,
there's hundreds of them. He said, let's use that. And I said, why? And I'd been raised singing in a church my whole life. And I really didn't, think that was the right thing to do. For me, anyway, especially didn't want to be pigeonholed as a Christian band or that we were proselytizing or some misunderstanding. And I just said, no, that's not going to work. And he said, well, just try it. So we rehearsed a little bit and I sort of reluctantly sang it. And, we went in the studio and all of a sudden it just became this thing. And you couldn't think of any other thing to call it or to, any other lyrics to throw in there. It just was what it was. Honestly, if John hadn't twisted my arm, that song probably wouldn't have ever happened.
The story about, I think it was somebody approaching the supermarket and said, I love that Carry a Laser song. Tell us that.
Carry a Laser. It was like some Spicoli-looking guy, out of Fast Times.
Hey, bud, let's party.
And he was just like, hey, Mr. Right, yeah. And he said, I love that song, Carry a Laser. Well, I've told that story a bunch of times. And then now there's this movie that came out with Steve Carell called The Way, Way Back. And they actually used that bit. All kind of drinking and singing and everything.
Hey, are you saying carry a laser?
That's what it is.
And the guy goes, no, it's not Carry a Laser. And they get into this argument.
Why would anybody write a song called Carry a Laser?
Because they like outer space.
Well, it was just used in Goldberg's. Did you see how they used it on that show?
No.
The TV show?
No.
It was pretty cool.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was kind of same experience I had growing up because about a family in the 80s and this kid's about the same age I was, but it's kind of that same experience. So it was pretty cool. You played SNL about that time. Do you remember playing Saturday Night Live?
I do. It was great. John Lithgow was the host. Oh, it was just, wow, iconic. Here we are,
Once again, Mr.
At that time, that was the hippest, coolest show on ever. Somebody told me later that Randy Newman called Lauren Michaels while we were performing, asking if we were really singing.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not. Somebody told me that.
Wow.
Because he thought that maybe there was some trickery going on or something.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Mr. Richard Page and this empowering song from 1986. What are your thoughts and memories of this song and this album? I know that you listened to it. Make sure to subscribe to join this Big Slammin' music community. To get more content, click on our Patreon link below to get Mr.'s classic album, Welcome to the Real World. Make sure to click on our Amazon link below. That's such a great album. So many other great songs. Help us keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe out there.